Hey guys, there is a important piece in this whole entire article, and I'm going to read through the whole thing because I know a lot of people are interested in that. But if you want to just jump to the part where it talks about the contents of the title, then I'm going to put the timestamp right here, and you can go ahead and jump straight to that. But I'm going to go through the whole interview as well and read through it. So let's begin.
Fulfill your destiny. TheorySabers.com.
What's up, guys? We have a bit of a treat today, and that is a brand new interview from Ian McDiarmid himself in honor of the Revenge of the Sith 20th anniversary, which is killing box office sales. And I'll do another video on that, but at least what I think it means. But let's go into this interview from Variety, because there's a lot of really cool behind-the-scenes stuff, and as you know me, I love behind-the-scenes stuff. Let's just start right off. So sit back, relax, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already.
Do it.
And let's get started. Revenge of the Sith, says the interviewer, marked Palpatine's true heel turn. Was it more fun playing his duality and manipulation, or finally leaning into that unambiguous evil? And there's some interesting stuff that goes into this interview that I've heard about, which is why we're getting into it. And it's he reveals that we were supposed to have, and maybe even will, a Palpatine show or movie that would have gone into Darth Plagueis. But I'm still confused as if that was supposed to be a Disney thing or a George Lucas thing. So I guess we'll find out. The manipulation was always fun, Ian McDiarmid said, but also I had more to do in Revenge of the Sith. I had more screen time, more time with Hayden Christensen, so that was more satisfying. I also had no idea that Palpatine would have power with a weapon. So to find that he was very good, to give my stunt double full credit, with a saber was interesting. How carefully mapped out was Palpatine's arc when you were first rehired to play him in The Phantom Menace? It wasn't mapped out at all. Really, when I first got the part, I had no idea what the world was that I'd be in charge of as the Emperor. So it started off as a big mystery. I had no idea that Palpatine would figure into the story so heavily, but by then it so happened that I was young enough to play the young senator. When I first met George about it, he said, "Do you know anyone who wants to play an Emperor?" I said, "I think you know the answer to that question." And then I got the script and realized that he was more than one character, which made it even more fascinating to play. An ordinary, everyday, fairly hypocritical politician with a monster hiding inside his body. Was there an early mention of the character that clued you in on what you want to focus on in your performance? Not really. Back in 1982, I met George in 10-minute chat over lunchtime. My agent told me if I wanted to be, I could be the Emperor of the universe. I knew he was the center of power, so I speculated in my head about maybe how he got here. But also, it didn't seem relevant because I died. But the more I did it, I thought it was a really tremendous invention of George's. It was fairly obvious to us all that he had more in mind than just an exciting adventure story for kids. In playing the character later on, was there a sort of reverse engineering of his decrepitude? Ian says, well, it was supposed to be my age, which was early 50s when I did Palpatine for the first time. So it wasn't so much that he was aging, but when he got that monstrous face and he was sort of in transition physically as well as mentally, the aging process wasn't really relevant. The evil process was. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. As I'm approaching his age myself, although the body is failing, the mind is as active as ever. Palpatine certainly had a hyperactive mind. And that was the thing with him. Is like the older Palpatine gets, the stronger he gets. Somewhat similar with the Jedi, except they get stronger in the Force, but their body gets weaker. I feel like with the Sith, they just draw upon their anger and hatred so much that they can live for a really long time. But what destroys them is not so much the age, it's more so the dark side itself, because it weighs very heavy on the corpse. This is a character who can turn on emotion when needed. What reality are you playing as an actor to be able to tap into those feelings? Well, he's a hypocrite, plain and simple, and a very good actor. He's a performance. He's only interested in one thing, absolute power. It sounds objective and black and white, but it's extraordinary. If you think of people who have absolute power or pretty damn near it, you think that's all they want. Really, wealth, and to be able to run people. He was a Sith from way back. Now, I don't really know what that means, but that particular personality is completely different from everybody else. He plays the human, but he isn't one. Palpatine embodies the dark side. He relishes it. He thinks people who don't enjoy it or don't allow themselves to be drawn into it are stupid. George's dialogue is famous for being a little bit stiff, but I feel like that formality serves Palpatine. I don't know where this comes from. It's just a lot of people say that it was stiff. Like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, there were some lines that were stiff, but does it make you feel the scene and the emotion? I think it does. I think that's fair, although underneath I managed to find a lot within it. I mean, obviously he hated the word friend. He thought it was stupid that people had friends because that was a sign of weakness. So when it came to a word like that, I could sort of dish it out with a bit of contempt. Anakin obviously experienced a lot of trauma in his past. How much of Palpatine's work manipulating him was aided by that trauma? Damn. I wouldn't want to quantify it, but that's right. It's both. Palpatine sees the spark of ambition, and he cultivates it. In the opera scene, when Anakin asks him to help save Padme's life, the phrase he uses is "not from a Jedi." In other words, you're going to have to betray everything that you think you stand for in order to join this side. You've got to embrace evil and all its totality. Otherwise, you'll be no use to yourself, which is why Anakin had to do what he had to do, because he felt if he didn't, then the Emperor wouldn't essentially give him the powers that he needed. Let alone me. It's amazing, manipulative stuff. That scene at the opera was, for me anyway, the apotheosis of it. He invites him into his world to be his right-hand man, and as Palpatine gets physically more frail, Vader will become stronger. The fight with Mace Windu, where Palpatine reveals his true form, offered you a great opportunity for scenery chewing. What sort of collaboration did you have with George to modulate the intensity of that moment? I smiled because of the things Nick Gillard told me about that scene. I thought I'd gone much too far, and George said, no, you can go much further. It's the moment when the monster becomes available, and he is ecstatic with delight because he can lose the hypocritical face. When we were doing The Phantom Menace, George said, you should think of your face as a carapace. I don't even know what that is. As if we'd made me up, and underneath was the real person. That was great, because to believe that my own face and voice were utterly manufactured was a huge help. I also rewatched Return of the Jedi. The way your character sits in that is kind of funny. He's got this heavy slouch on the throne. Were there any performance details like that you brought back for prequels to plant a seed of what was to come? That's kind of a lame question. Not really. My approach is never what you might call method. It's the words on the page and what they do to me inside. As you know, somebody else was cast as the Emperor in The Empire Strikes Back, and they couldn't do it for some reason. Mary Selway, the casting director, assured George that I could play old. Having seen me play the old Howard Hughes, he was called Henry Hackamore in Sam Shepard's play Seduced. At 38, I'd played a number of parts which are much older than my years, and because I saw the makeup and the cane, I knew I had to be decrepit. But inside, there was this terrible, unbelievable power which was stronger than anybody else in the universe of the Star Wars movies. You mentioned Clive Revel, who voiced the Emperor before you. He passed away not long ago. I was very sorry to hear that. Did you two ever cross paths? He said, I met him a couple times. He was a very fine actor. It must have been disappointing to him that he didn't continue to play him. But of course, he didn't really play him in the first place. It was a woman in a mask and his voice. Interestingly enough, in Return of the Jedi, our director Richard Marquand gave me a tape early on and said, if you can get your voice like Clive's, George might let you keep it. I had no idea I wouldn't be able to use my own voice. I thought if Clive knew what that creature had become or what he looked like, he would be doing something along the lines of what I was doing. So I continued to do my little voice like that. George didn't say stop, and neither did Richard. Well, that's cool. Yeah, Ian always said that he made it sound like a frog. By apprentice ribbit.
Long have I waited.
Later, we came to revoice everything in the studio in London with George and Kathleen Kennedy, who I met for the first time, and indeed Steven Spielberg, who I met for the first time. And when we did the first few scenes, Steven said, oh my God, you're evil. I thought, that's a relief. Was there any moment where you became convinced that you were done playing this character for the last time? Oh yes, I mean, I thought he was killed, so when I got a call to come in and talk about the prequels, to find out about Sidious and all the rest of it, I thought, I've got lucky again. But I thought this is definitely the finish, and then J.J. Abrams called me again and said he's coming back. Somehow, Palpatine returned. That was great to do too. Then to find out that I had a granddaughter who was out to get me was very satisfying too, particularly played by Daisy Ridley. Did anyone explain to you how this character had children in the first place? There was never any discussion of any of that. It was up to me to work it out in my head. There was talk in The Phantom Menace about something called midichlorians, which were involved somehow in Anakin's birth. George didn't want to go too deeply into that, but we reckon it was kind of virgin birth, though one ought not to say that because God knows you get all sorts of complications. Then people ask the slightly embarrassing question, does this evil monster ever have sex? And we don't really know the answer to that question either. Things in tubes you think about probably, rather than the awful vision that you might have in your head of this monster either ever having a sexual relationship with anybody. What were the things that you did know coming into Rise of Skywalker? What did you have to work out for yourself? Rise of Skywalker. It seemed entirely probable that Palpatine had Plan B, even though he was very, very badly damaged. He would be able to put it together in some form. When I realized I had a sort of astral wheelchair, that was even better. I just had these 4 guys who whisked me around the studio. I can't tell you how much fun that was. Daisy was more worried about that than anything else. And then, of course, we had to devise another makeup look, which was even more grotesque than the previous one. So unfortunate, man. It could have had such a better sequel trilogy. There was at some point supposed to be a series based around Palpatine. Was any of that backstory shared with you as part of the character's mythology? Okay, here we go. Finally, we get to the part of the video. As I went through it, to get to this part.
Long have I...
It was like super far down. I guess I gotta hit search, but what fun is that? There was at some point supposed to be a series based around Palpatine. Was any of that backstory shared with you as part of the character's mythology? So the only thing I know about this is George's Underworld show. There was a rumor, I don't know how legit it is, and we're about to find out more, that in the Underworld show, it was going to be about a lot of different characters, mainly Boba Fett, young Boba Fett, and also Palpatine. Now, allegedly, from what I read from a Lucasfilm employee that was talking about it, and I can't even remember his name, I can't verify it, but it was in a video somewhere on the channel, so it's proof of it, me reading the article, that Palpatine, the reason he became evil was because of a bad breakup. I'm so happy it never happened. But anyways, I don't know how true that is. So Ian says, just the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. It's fairly obvious that my character murdered Plagueis on his road to becoming Palpatine. But beyond that, no. With George, you didn't discuss anything really. You turn up and you shoot. These films take a long time to make, and the pressure is intense for many reasons. Of course, George was at the forefront of all of that. So he had all of that to think about day by day. He takes a good deal of trouble over casting, but once he's cast, then he likes the actors to get on with it. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can't imagine how many dollars per minute a Star Wars movie is. It has to be something like $100,000 a minute, well, especially in today's standards, but it's got to be something like back then, probably like 30 grand a minute or something. You know, if Revenge of the Sith cost 117 million to make, I mean, that's what is the math on that? I think that works out to about $97,500 per minute of Revenge of the Sith. Let me see if that's right. Oh my gosh, no, it's way more than that. Every minute of Revenge of the Sith is about $1 million. That's insane. That's actually insane. For example, the scene at the opera, I'd already done a scene in the makeup in the morning. We went to that in the afternoon, and my voice wasn't in its best shape. It's probably the most Palpatine had ever spoken in the movie. I was kind of hoarse, so I was worried about that, mainly because I had about 4 wind machines being driven at me in the scene where he's turning into the monster. So I was a bit throaty. And we did it about 20 times on a Friday afternoon. Not the best time to shoot when everyone wants to get off for the weekend. And, in addition to my throat and the fact that it was late in the afternoon on a Friday, there was a birthday party for the first AD, and a man in a gold suit, i.e. Anthony Daniels, was busy getting the champagne ready just off the set on a trolley. And at one point, a mobile phone went off and the person answered it. So all of that was going on just outside my vision, but oddly enough, when the pressure's on, the concentration can be even more intense. In a strange way, it may have helped the scene. You guys remember the crash out from Christian Bale on the set of The Terminator? If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Makes sense, man. The guy's acting. It's a lot of pressure. There were some adverse reactions to The Rise of Skywalker. How did you feel about the backlash of bringing back the Emperor? Well, there's always something, isn't there? I don't read that stuff and I'm not online, so it'll only reach me if someone mentions it. I thought there might be a bit of a fuss about bringing him back, but as I said, mine and Palpatine's logic was entirely reasonable. This man, who was horribly maimed, thought maybe one day it might happen to him, and we've got to have Plan B. I love the whole idea that he should come back and be even more powerful than he was before, though this time he had to be utterly destroyed, so I think he's dead. So in the Episode 9 book, which I read to make more sense of the film, what they did was in Return of the Jedi, before he even exploded in that scene that we see in Return of the Jedi, he had already transferred his essence into the body that he had ready to go on Exegol. That's how that happened. For many of the actors in these huge franchises, it feels like the visibility that it gives them can be a double-edged sword. Has there, over the years, been a sort of reckoning over how helpful or unhelpful the role was in terms of people appreciating your versatility as an actor? Well, over here in the UK, I was known principally for acting on stage, and I've done small parts in the odd movie. As far as people over here were concerned, this was just another great part. But maybe because I'm a Scot, Scottish people are fantastically unimpressed, so should you actually get any airs, you'll soon be cut off at the knees. But most people are very friendly and great fun. The other day, I went to a restaurant just a couple of nights ago up in Scotland, and I went and said, "Do you have a table? I'm sorry I didn't book." And he managed to say, "I just never expected the Emperor of the Universe to walk into our restaurant." So that was amusing. It's absurd. In retrospect, what's the characteristic that you unexpectedly share after playing him for so long? I've always found deep-rooted anger easier to play than some other things, and that's what motivates him, a terrible kind of fury and lust for revenge. Now, I don't have any of that, but I have a kind of understanding of it. I've always been fascinated by power. The thing that's always puzzled me about people when they make a lot of money is that somehow there's not enough. They need to be richer or more powerful than anybody else, and that seems to be the overriding objective of a lot of people. That fascinates me, and I suppose that's something I could lean into when I was playing Palpatine, both older and younger. So it's kind of like Palpatine just nothing is good enough. Always wants more. That's actually, it's literally how he's portrayed. Is like Palpatine could have the entire galaxy at his fingertips and it still won't be enough. He'll want to venture out someplace else, reach some new form, have some new apprentice, someone powerful, more powerful, constantly. Playing the role has been a tremendous pleasure, all thanks to George, to be part of this first giant story told on film. As I said to you earlier, that's luck. It's just happened out of the blue because somebody else wasn't available. But sometimes that's what life's like. Maybe Palpatine's abilities have translated to you and you were able to manipulate the universe to put yourself in the role. That's an interesting theory.
He said it! He said it!
Not one that can be tested, unfortunately. This interview has been edited and condensed. That's crazy. There was at some point supposed to be a series based around Palpatine. Just the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. So we were supposed to get a series about Darth Plagueis the Wise, and I'm guessing George was going to do this. I did not know that. I never knew that George had plans to make a Darth Plagueis show. Wow. Oh man, it is so unfortunate that we will never see that from George. But hey, at least we got to see it from Leslie Headland. Could you imagine if they had adapted that Darth Plagueis? Because a lot of the novels that George signed off on for the movies, he was like all the movies novelizations, he was extremely hands-on. Like bro was combing through that. And in my interview with Matthew Stover, he was talking about how particular and hands-on George was with the novel. Now, and he had to sign off on every little bit that had to do with the novelization of the films. A lot of the Legends novels, George would approve the topics, but he wasn't combing through them like he did the films, like the film books, the novel adaptations from the film. And I feel like with Darth Plagueis, since it was very close to the film, I like to think, don't know this for fact, that George was more hands-on with this novel than he was any of the other ones, perhaps like Bane, for example, or Revan, or Deceived, or any of the other EU books, like NJO, Legacy of the Force, or any of even the ones in between, like Labyrinth of Evil, Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, like the ones even in between the prequels. I don't even think he was as like hands-on with those as he was the Darth Plagueis novel, but I could be completely wrong. That's just my headcanon, I suppose. But a story about Darth Plagueis and adapting it from, let's say, the book, from the actual source material, from George, from real Lucasfilm, the George Lucasfilm, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
This is outrageous. It's unfair.
Essentially just getting like a chapter by chapter show from the book. That would have been a real treat, let me tell you. And it's unfortunate that we never got that. And, years ago, you might ask me, like, I hope that Disney does this. I hope Lucasfilm does this. And now I'm like, please don't do this, because we don't know what we're going to get. We're going to get Kathleen messing something up and just completely destroying something that is super important. Like, for example, putting Ki-Adi-Mundi into the Acolyte when he wasn't even supposed to be alive, or, putting the frickin' Plagueis in there, or Yoda not sensing any of the deaths from the Jedi, or anything like that. Which, in fact, was one of the first things that Nick said when I told him about the premise of the Acolyte. He said that he's like, the Jedi would have sensed that. I was like, yes, they would have. But did they? No. At least the most powerful one of them all didn't, Yoda. Anyways, there's that interview. It's, watching the 20th anniversary for Revenge of the Sith come to theaters, and a lot of people have so much love for it, has been really quite a nice treat. And I'm going to go over this in another video because it needs to be examined in its own entirety. But as for this, I'm very happy that they're interviewing Ian McDiarmid. I wish we could get, another interviewer to talk to him and ask him questions. You know, I would say maybe regarding to more of like George's thoughts on different characters and things like that, because I'm sure that George would have given him a little more on, you know, I mean, like this alone, like this is breaking the internet. Nobody has talked about this. A Plagueis, a story on Darth Plagueis the Wise, a show, a series based around Palpatine. Just the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. It was fairly obvious that my character murdered Plagueis on his road to becoming Palpatine, but beyond that, no. That's incredible. I was just about to say it again. I wish we'll get that. Do I? I don't know, man. I don't have faith in them. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this. Do you actually want a Darth Plagueis show to be made by Disney? I almost have more faith in their animated projects because I feel like Dave gets much more control over those than the live action stuff or whoever's in control of them. But I think it's Dave. And I don't know. I'm very like skeptical about where they would take the stories now if they were to do these shows, because they're just so drawn out and they're there as a business model. They're not there to tell a story. So it's business first always for them. So it's anyways, full interview is on variety.com, and I'm very happy that they're interviewing the OGs and giving them a little more love and dropping little, like in this whole last interview, man, this was literally the most important thing, and the guy didn't even like touch more on this. Crazy. Anyways, have a great day, guys. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one.